Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. So today we're talking about a book that is part of my 6 books for 2026 challenge. If you haven't watched the video, I'll link it down below and here as well so you can go check it out and come back here. But this book is the January/February book for the challenge. Well, the challenge is basically me reading 6 books every 2 months and talking about them here with you. And I was supposed to come by the end of January to talk about this book with you guys, but I got really sick. As you can tell by my voice, I was like, honestly, I didn't think I was gonna die, but I thought that I was gonna have to go to the hospital, and I didn't. I am good now, and I was able to just stay home and well, I don't work outside of the house, right? So that was good. But if I had like a normal job, I would have had to go to the hospital because, oh my goodness, what a crazy bug that was, or it is still, because I'm not 100%, I'm 95%. But it's a kid's bug. Like, gosh, I had no idea that they were so strong. I don't have any kids, but I do babysit my husband's goddaughter from time to time, and I absolutely love her, adore her. I love taking care of her. But that week, well, she wasn't sick, but she did have the sniffles, and she got sick in December, I think around Christmas time. I don't remember now, but I think it was around Christmas time. And well, I thought that she wasn't sick anymore, but she had the sniffles. But I realized while I was babysitting her that I was getting sick. I was coming down with something. And I was like, this is really weird, but I'll power through and I won't get sick because I haven't gotten sick in 2.5 years almost, since November 2023. And I was like, you know what? This is okay. It's just, a cold. Gosh, no, it wasn't. It was like worse than any flu I've ever had. And it's insane how kids, they have these bugs, but they don't, like, they're not as bad as we are. What is up with that? It's like chicken pox, right? When little kids get chicken pox, they're fine. But when we do, we almost die. And I know because I got it when I was 16 years old. So yeah. But anyway, this bug was horrific. I was down for 2.5 weeks. My husband was down for like a week. And I just have to, now accept the fact that I am not all powerful and that I will get sick eventually, because I thought that I was like out of the woods, that I was never gonna get sick again. Anyway, that happened and I'm coughing still. So if this video is a bit choppy, it is because I'm coughing a lot and having coughing sessions, but everything's gonna be okay. And we're gonna talk about this amazing, amazing book that I read for the first time. I am talking about A Moveable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. Oh my goodness, you guys, what is this book? I have only read of Hemingway. I've only read, well, except for this book, obviously, The Old Man and the Sea, and it was one of my favorite books ever. Actually, it still is. I absolutely love that book. I think it's so earnest, but it is. It's earnest, is sweet, is delicate, it's gentle, but it's strong at the same time. You have a lot of sadness and frustration happening in that book, but it is amazing. I read it first when I was 16, I think. No, yeah, 16. And it was in high school when I lived in the US for a year. And I loved it. Then I reread it when I was 20, something, early 20s, and it continued being one of my favorites. But now that I've read A Moveable Feast, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to read everything that Hemingway ever wrote. But because I've never felt that way before. I don't know why. I love The Old Man and the Sea, but I didn't want to read the other books. The Sun Also Rises, A Farewell to Arms. I don't know why. I was never really interested in those books. But now, after reading this one, I definitely want to. But yeah, so let's dive into this book. I want to read some parts of it because I just think it's so amazing that we have to have this experience of reading this book together, at least parts of it, because it's just so amazing. And he is such an amazing writer. And it's funny because when I started reading this book, I think the first 2 pages, I was like, you know what, I'm not crazy about this guy's writing style. Although I love The Old Man of the Sea, but like in this kind of style, like biography kind of, style. And I even complained about it to my husband. I said, I'm not crazy about the way he writes. Like, and then he was like, no, you're crazy because he's amazing. And I said, okay. I continued and I was like, yeah, you're right. It's so good. And I wanted to finish this book in like a day, but I didn't because I had other responsibilities. I have other books that I have to read. So I can't just sit down and read one book. That's why I do sometimes reading marathons, because that's not part of my reality, just sitting and reading one book. I know that most people do that, but I can't because I have a lot of other responsibilities. But that's what I wanted to do with this book because it was so, so good. But so guys, Hemingway, just giving a bit of a backstory here, was born in Illinois in 1899. So yeah, 19th century, isn't that crazy? Well, last year of the century, but still. And he began writing in 1917, actually. So he wrote some like short stories, and he was involved in journalism for a while, and then he moved to Paris in 1921, and this is what this book is about. It's about those 5 years that he lived in Paris, and not everything that he did, but I think the most important things, and a bit of the literary scene as well in Paris at that time. So we have some other writers here, very famous writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ezra Pound, James Joyce, amongst others. And it's just an amazing book. And there's this saying, this quote actually, not a saying, it's a quote from Hemingway to his friend that he said in 1950. And he says, if you are lucky enough to have lived in Paris as a young man, then wherever you go for the rest of your life, it stays with you. For Paris is a movable feast. And oh my goodness, I get it. I just get it. I have never lived in Paris, but I get it. Because, well, I've been to Paris twice, and I absolutely loved it. But there's something different about living there, especially during this time. And I'm pretty sure there will never be a time like this time where James Joyce, Scott Fitzgerald, Hemingway, Ezra Pound, amongst others, that they were living at the same time in Paris and in the same group of writers, and going to the same cafes, going to the same pubs or restaurants, whatever you want to call it, hanging out by the Seine and talking about books and drinking wine. There will never be this time again in the world. And there's something special too about living in Europe. Well, I've lived in Dublin for almost 3 years, and well, it's definitely not the same, let me tell you. I love Dublin, I love Ireland, but it's just so different. And part of me wished that I had moved to Paris while I was in Europe, but it didn't happen. And here I am in Canada, good old Canada. But I'm happy. That's the most important thing. But yeah, so he moved to Paris, like I said, in 1921. And he had only written and published like pieces, articles, and short stories. And his first book he published, The Sun Also Rises, that was his first book he published by, was it 1926 or 1920? Yeah, 1926. So by the end of at the end of this book, actually, he already talks about the writing and the rewriting of The Sun Also Rises. So it is quite interesting. But, well, he starts the book in 1921. And it's just really good how he describes the walks that he would go on and everything that he would do with his wife. So he was married to Hadley. They had actually just gotten married in 1921, and they stayed together until 1926, I believe. So exactly the length of this book. So they were together for 5 years. And it's just really interesting how he talks about his routine, his writing routine, where he would go in the morning, he would go to a cafe and have a café crème and write his book, and then go have lunch and have a bottle of wine, because he would have so much wine, like throughout the day. It's crazy. I could never have that much wine, like ever. And he would have it in one day. It's crazy. Yeah. And that's another thing too, like the alcoholism present in this like circle of writers was insane. Although this book is from years 1921 to 1926, he started writing it when he was living in Cuba in 1957, if I'm not mistaken. And then he finished it in 1964. That's when it was published. So he had a lot of time to think these things through. Maybe he did write like a journal while he was in Paris, because how are you going to remember dialogues and like these details? Because he's so detailed here. Like, gosh, there are some dialogues that I just wish that I hadn't read. I felt like it was too personal, especially involving Fitzgerald here. So yeah, maybe he did keep a journal or something, because how did he remember all of that, you know, years and years and years later? But he did somehow, and he was very, I think, very faithful to what happened. He says something in the beginning. It's not the note, it's the preface. He says, if the reader prefers, this book may be regarded as fiction, but there is always the chance that such a book of fiction may throw some light on what has been written as fact. Well, but he says that it, for reasons sufficient to the writer, many places, people, observations, and impressions have been left out of this book. Oh my goodness. Then why didn't you leave out what you said about Fitzgerald? But anyway, some were secrets. And so, well, one for sure that you told us about was a secret. Anyway, some were secrets and some were known by everyone, and everyone has written about them and will doubtless write more. But it's amazing, you guys. So yeah, in the beginning of the book, he describes more like his writing routine and what he would like to do in Paris. And then he also talks about Gertrude Stein, who was a writer. I've never read anything by her, but I wasn't really intrigued by it, to be honest, reading this book. I'm not sure if I really want to. He wasn't that charitable with her either. No, it wasn't just Fitzgerald. He wasn't... I wouldn't say nice to her, but charitable. I think that's the word. He wasn't that charitable with Gertrude Stein. But the beginning of the book is very like focused on this relationship that he had with her, of friendship, and talking about books and writers, and the writing scene. It was sort of like a club. And although I found it interesting, I liked the part about Shakespeare and Company better with, what was her name? Sylvia Beach. So yes, Shakespeare and Company, there is a chapter just for it. And I've been there, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same store. It's not the same. It was like a co-op, right? It was like a company. People would go and pay like an amount every month and rent books and then give them back and get another one. And that there was like this whole community in Shakespeare and Company. And a lot of writers were a part of it. There's a lot of pictures too in this edition. Here we have a picture of, I think, is that James Joyce? Yeah, it's James Joyce, Sylvia Beach, and Adrienne Monnier. I think that's how you pronounce it, Shakespeare and Company. But it's not the same. I've been there and it's definitely not the same. I liked it. I thought it was cute, but like, and I bought 2 books actually that were completely, excuse me, destroyed by Canada Post. Yes, look, they left my box of books outside in the rain. I live in British Columbia. It rains all the time, and they left the box outside. Anyway, so yeah, these 2 I bought there, and look, oh, just makes me so sad. Look at this. It's just, so that is 1984, and this one is, no, sorry, that's Animal Farm, and this is 1984. This one is like not as bad. Actually, both are pretty bad. But I just wanted to show you guys the 2 books that I got there. But yeah, it's not the same thing. Definitely not the same thing. It made me want to go back in time and visit Shakespeare and Company when it was still as amazing as it was. But he says this, page 35. In those days, there was no money to buy books. I borrowed books from the rental library of Shakespeare and Company, which was the library and bookstore of Sylvia Beach at 12 Rue de l'Odéon. On a cold, wind-swept street. This was a warm, cheerful place with a big stove in the winter, tables and shelves of books, new books in the windows, and photographs on the wall of famous writers, both dead and living. The photographs all looked like snapshots, and even the dead writers looked as though they had really been alive. And then he starts describing Sylvia. One thing that I noticed here is that he describes people like sometimes in a charitable way and sometimes not, but he always talks about like if the person has nice legs for some reason. Like he always focused on legs. I think he was probably a leg person. I don't know, but he talks about legs a lot in this book when he's describing people. But then he says, I was very shy when I first went into the bookshop and I did not have enough money on me to join the rental library. She told me that I could pay the deposit anytime I had the money and made me out a card. Instead, I could take as many books as I wished. So people kind of knew who he was, although he wasn't famous or anything amongst like the writers and in this little like club, he was known and people knew about writers who were starting, right? The ones that had started already, like for example, Fitzgerald, he had just published, I believe, in this book, I don't remember when it was, but The Great Gatsby. And it's very interesting to see how it was before when they weren't necessarily famous, weren't necessarily rich. Like Hemingway, he is quite poor during this whole time that he is in Paris, but he was happy in the last part of the book. The last paragraph just kind of brought me to tears to think that he was just so happy. It was a time where he was happily married to Hadley, and they didn't have any money, but at least they were happy in Paris with their little kid Bumby. And during the whole book, he keeps talking about like, oh, me and Hadley, we were happy, but we didn't know what was going to happen. So they got a divorce, and I was shocked because when I started reading this book, I didn't really know about his love life. And then doing my research, I saw that he had 4 wives, and Hadley broke up at the end of this book, and because he, well, started something with her friend. So it's not necessarily like, it kind of brought me down. And he's even honest about this. Like in the book, he tells us that this was what happened and that he was to blame, and he cheated. But it just made me sad, you know. While reading it, you think that everything's going to be okay, that they're going to be good together, that they're going to be happy together with their little kid, but that's not what happens. But anyway, I really like the part about Shakespeare and Company. He talks about the different seasons in Paris and how the winter was just too cold and they had to go somewhere else because, like I said, they were quite poor and they lived in an apartment. Like, I don't even know if it was an apartment, like a studio, something like that. They didn't have a lot of rooms, like the heating wasn't great, and to think that he was living there with his wife and kid, right? But it worked. He would get some money from like the articles and the short stories that he would sell. He sold a lot of short stories to Germany and other places. Not a lot in Paris, I think, or in English-speaking countries, but he did at first, of course, but he did sell a lot to Germany, and that's how they would survive. He would receive payment, and then they would just like live off of that. But the amount of eating and drinking, I just feel like they're always complaining, not complaining, but like stating that they don't have a lot of money, right? That they have to save money, but at the same time, they were spending a lot on wine. But you know what? I don't even blame them. It's Paris. It's just that the amount was a bit crazy. And also there was like this, he was so poor at one point that he didn't have enough money to eat lunch. So he would go to the Jardin de Luxembourg, pardon my French, but he used to go there, walk around, and then look at the paintings and during lunchtime to forget that he was hungry. Anyway, it just made me a bit sad, but then again, it's okay to skip lunch. You know what I mean? Like I eat once, twice a day. Anyway, so he talks about spring, how spring it was amazing and how much fun they would have, and the walks that they would go on. And it's truly beautiful to see Paris at this time, because I know it's different now. I was there in 2022 twice, and it's already so different from this book. There's a moment in this book that I just wanted to read you guys because it just made me so happy, about a goat herd in Paris. Here, found it. Look at this. When spring came, even the fall spring, there were no problems except where to be happiest. In the spring mornings, I would work early while my wife still slept. The windows were open wide, and the cobbles of the street were drying after the rain. The sun was drying the wet faces of the houses that faced the window. The shops were still shuttered. The goat herd came up the street, blowing his pipes, and a woman who lived on the floor above us came out onto the sidewalk with a big pot. The goat herd chose one of the heavy bagged black milk goats and milked her into the pot while his dog pushed the others onto the sidewalk. The goats looked around, turning their necks like sightseers. The goat herd took the money from the woman and thanked her and went on up the street, piping, and the dog herded the goats on ahead, their horns bobbing. I went back to writing, and the woman came upstairs with the goat milk. She wore her felt-soled clinging shoes, and I only heard her breathing as she stopped on the stairs outside our door, and then the shutting of her door. She was the only customer for goat milk in our building. And that just made me so happy to think that there was a time in life that Paris, well, was already a big city. It was 1921, right? I think. And there was a goat herd with goats and his dog, and you could just go downstairs with a big pot and get some milk. You know, I love goat milk. I love it. Cheese as well. I think it's amazing. But it just made me so happy. That just doesn't happen anymore in Paris. You know what I mean? I think it does, and maybe like in the countryside of France and other countries. But like Paris, I don't know. It's just, there's a melancholy about this, about a book that captured the essence of this Paris. It's like a love letter to Paris, honestly. It's just so good. But then he goes ahead and he talks about so much. He talks about like James Joyce, apparently they did have a friendship, but he doesn't really talk that much about him. He talks about how he liked going to the restaurant with his wife and kids, and they all spoke Italian for some reason. But he talks about other writers as well. He talks about how he was kind of like not really addicted, but really enthusiastic about gambling horses. I don't even know what, like I forgot the word that he uses. It wasn't horsing, I forgot now, but anyway, like gambling basically. And that part was kind of like, it just made me a bit uncomfortable because the horses were what's the word again, doped. Like, yeah, I think that's what they were. Anyway, I don't even know how they did it, but they like gave them, you know, medication to make them stronger. I just found it uncomfortable, but you know, that's life. That's how he also made a bit of money at that time. But anyway, it's quite interesting. He talks about writers that he likes and he doesn't like. I thought it was interesting that he mentioned Dostoevsky a lot here, and Dostoevsky is one of my favorite writers. And I just thought it was interesting. Look at what he says about him. In Dostoevsky, there were things believable and not to be believed, but some so true they changed you as you read them. Frailty and madness, wickedness and saintliness. And then he says, he's talking to his friend about Dostoevsky, and he says, I've been wondering about Dostoevsky, I said. How can a man write so badly, so unbelievably badly, and make you feel so deeply? No, he didn't write badly, but I get what he's saying, because his style is quite chunky. I don't even know how to describe it. It's not like, you know, Charles Dickens or George Eliot or Edith Wharton, or many others, Thomas Hardy, you know, but I do love his writing. One of my favorite authors of all time. So then he starts talking more and more halfway through the book, actually from like page 130 or something. He starts talking about Fitzgerald. Actually, no, 149. He starts talking about Fitzgerald. And this is what he says. The first time I ever met Scott Fitzgerald, a very strange thing happened. Many strange things happened with Scott, but this one I was never able to forget. He had come into the Dingo Bar in the Rue de l'Ambre, where I was sitting with some completely worthless characters, had introduced himself and introduced a tall, pleasant man who was with him as Dunk Chaplin, the famous pitcher. I had not followed Princeton baseball and had not heard of Dunk Chaplin, but he was extraordinarily nice, unworried, relaxed, and friendly, and I much preferred him to Scott. Scott was a man then who looked like a boy with a face between handsome and pretty. He had very fair, wavy hair, a high forehead, excited and friendly eyes, and a delicate, long-lipped Irish mouth that on a girl would have been the mouth of a beauty. And like I said, he describes him a lot. He says that he has short legs. Like I said, he's very kind of like obsessed with legs for some reason. But I think the worst thing here is when he talks about, and I'm not sure I'm going to talk about this here. If you want to know the secret that he told everyone about Fitzgerald, then you can look it up online or you can read the book. Even better, read the book. It's amazing. You can read it in a day, honestly. But he said something quite personal about Fitzgerald's physical traits, or one physical trait specifically. And I thought it wasn't really charitable, and I didn't really like it. It's funny because you do feel protective over Hemingway reading this book, and I sure did. I really did like him a lot reading the book, and I was rooting for him. Even when he was like talking about other people's appearance, like, that's fine, you know, that's like, you do you, I'm reading your book, we're good. But when he said that about Fitzgerald, he just went too far. But I don't know why he decided to do this. It was just a choice that he made. But I thought it was quite interesting when he talks about Fitzgerald and his wife and their relationship. I thought it was quite sad, actually. The way that he was prevented from working on his books and his writings. I don't know what would have happened to him if he had stayed with his wife or whatever, but it was quite sad to read this part in the book. Almost as sad as I was when I realized that Hemingway wasn't going to stay with Hadley and that something bad was about to happen. And then at the end of the book, he does tell us that it's because he cheated on her, and she eventually filed for divorce. But it's funny because I felt like he was my friend, especially when he's talking about Russian literature, and I love Russian literature, especially Dostoevsky. I've read everything he ever wrote. So, well, the big novels and the novellas. I'm still working on the short stories. I still have probably 4 short stories to go, or 5, and then I'm done with everything that Dostoevsky wrote. So, yeah, I'm proud of myself about that. But I felt like I was his buddy reading this book, and I thought it was interesting because he's talking about reading the classics and the things that he says about Dostoevsky. I just wish that we could talk in person. So he says, "You can't read Dostoevsky over and over. I had Crime and Punishment on a trip when we ran out of books down at Troons, and I couldn't read it again when we had nothing to read. I read the Austrian papers and studied German until we found some like other author in another town." But yeah, he says that he can't reread Dostoevsky, which is crazy because I always want to reread it. Although I do understand because it's really intense and it takes a lot of your energy, like fuel, to read it. And also it's a bit like too intense emotionally, psychologically. But it's funny that he said, "I'm going to try to read The Brothers again, Brothers Karamazov. It was probably my fault." And yes, it was your fault because that's how I got hooked reading the Brothers Karamazov. I was in my early 20s. I was at university. I was in law school, and I went to the library, the university library, and I went there and I found a book called The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. I was like, I never read Dostoevsky. I'm just going to read this book. And I read it and I absolutely loved it. And I decided in that moment to read everything that he had ever written, or better, that he wrote, because he has passed away, obviously. But that's what I did. I'm still doing it. But yeah, that book was what got me like really into it. But yeah, so he talks about so much, you guys. It's such an amazing, amazing book. If you like literature, like if you like the literary world, if you like poetry, if you like Hemingway, if you like Paris, and even if you like just one of those things, it's worth it. Honestly, even if you don't like reading, I think that this could be a really good book for you to read or start. It's really easy. It's the writing style is really good. It's not complicated. It's not difficult, and it just makes you happy and it makes you laugh. It's really funny, in some ways, and sad in some others. But that's life. So yeah, I think this book is kind of perfect. I'm not sure if I think I still like The Old Man and the Sea better, but honestly, this one is definitely one of my favorites now. I will always think of this fondly, and I will probably reread it because it's just such a nice read. Like take with you on a trip or something. Just you read it super fast, and you have some good laughs and some good moments here with our Hemingway. So yeah, well, let me know if you've read it. Let me know if you liked it. And yeah, let's talk about this book in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. So I'll see you next time at the end of April, with our next book from the 6 books for 2026 challenge. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon.